There comes a moment in your life when you realize something painful, that you were never hated for the love you gave, you were hated for the mirror you became. People don't fear cruelty, people fear truth, and love is the most truthful mirror of all. You look back at certain people and ask yourself, how could they treat me like that? How could someone I cared for so deeply choose to wound me? And the answer is far more psychological than personal. Your love exposed them. It illuminated every wound they thought they had buried. It revealed the insecurities they believed no one could see. It awakened their dormant fears. Fear of intimacy, fear of abandonment, fear of unworthiness. You didn't hurt them. You reminded them of the hurt they refused to face. When someone carries unhealed wounds, love does not feel like comfort. It feels like threat, because love asks you to open. It asks you to be honest. It asks you to show parts of yourself you've spent years hiding. And some people would rather destroy the relationship than confront the monsters inside their own psyche. So they lash out, they withdraw, they betray, they blame you, even when all you gave them was compassion. Not because you deserved it, but because you were the safest place for their unconscious to erupt. We hurt the ones we trust the most, not out of intention, but out of unconscious reflex. And the tragedy is this: many people will mistreat you because they saw in you the person they wanted to become, but didn't believe they could. Your strength triggered their weakness. Your calm revealed their chaos. Your authenticity threatened their mask. Your love highlighted their inability to love. To them, you were not a person. You were a psychological confrontation. Something in you awakened what was sleeping in them. And not everyone is ready for awakening. Some would rather call you too much than admit they have become too little. Some would rather leave you than risk being known. Some would rather hate you than face themselves. But here is the truth you must never forget. Their behavior was never evidence of your unworthiness, only evidence of their unhealed wounds. They treated you badly because you were the mirror they were not ready to look into. You were the light they were not prepared to stand under. You were the love their heart didn't yet know how to receive. You were punished not for your flaws, but for your ability to reveal theirs. People often mistreat you not because of who you are, but because of the parts of themselves they refuse to meet within. This truth becomes clear the moment you stop personalizing the actions of others and start seeing the deeper psychological forces at play. When someone carries unprocessed fear, shame, insecurity, or unresolved childhood wounds, those inner shadows do not stay quietly contained. They leak into their relationships, they distort perception, and they turn innocent interactions into emotional battlefields. You become the recipient of emotions that were never meant for you. In their eyes, you are not a person, but a projection screen, a place where they unload the parts of themselves they cannot face. Every human being carries what might be called an inner basement, a dark place in the psyche filled with buried memories, suppressed feelings, and identities they rejected long ago. Some people have learned to open the door and clean that space slowly, painfully, courageously. Others lock it tight and pretend it doesn't exist. When you enter the life of someone who has denied their own inner world for years, your presence can trigger a reaction they do not consciously understand. Your respect for yourself challenges their self-neglect. Your honesty threatens their denial. Your emotional availability exposes their emotional avoidance. Your strength reminds them of the weakness they suppressed. Even your kindness can act like a spotlight, revealing the numbness inside them that they refuse to acknowledge. This is why some people become cold, distant, or even cruel to those who show them genuine warmth. Love pulls things to the surface. It brings unseen layers into awareness. It creates transparency where they once relied on darkness. And suddenly, they feel exposed. They feel vulnerable. They feel seen. Not because you demanded anything from them, but simply because the light you carry makes their shadows impossible to ignore. They attack to distract themselves from what is awakening inside. They withdraw to avoid confronting the truth. They blame you to avoid facing themselves. The mistreatment becomes a psychological shield, a way to prevent the collapse of their fragile self-image. When someone mistreats you, it is rarely because they have examined your character and found it lacking. It is because your presence interrupts the story they tell themselves about who they are. People who have not yet met their own anger become enraged by your assertiveness. People who fear abandonment become hostile when you get close. People who suppress their desires criticize you for pursuing yours. People who reject their emotions accuse you of being too sensitive. People who have never explored their depth mock you for having any. What they cannot accept within themselves becomes what they reject in you, and this pattern repeats until they choose to confront their inner landscape. The tragedy is that many individuals do not realize they are acting from these unconscious forces. They believe their reactions are justified, rational, even moral. They build narratives to protect their ego, that you were too much, that you didn't understand them, that you expected too deeply, that you brought out something they weren't ready for. In reality, you activated dormant material in their psyche, material that demanded healing. They were not prepared to begin. Your behavior was not the threat, the awakening within them was. And because they lacked the tools to navigate that awakening, they did what the unhealed ego always does: defend, project, and attack. Understanding this does not mean you must tolerate mistreatment. It means you recognize that their actions were never a measure of your worth. It was never about your goodness, your loyalty, your sincerity, or your heart. It was about the emotional battles they fought alone in the dark, battles they never admitted even to themselves. You walked into their world as a mirror, reflecting back the very aspects of their soul they had spent years trying to hide. And for some people, that reflection is unbearable. They would rather break the mirror than face the image it reveals, even if that mirror is you. Your love exposes the gaps in their soul, and what they cannot heal alone, they attack in others. This is one of the most misunderstood dynamics in human relationships, because people assume mistreatment comes from dislike or incompatibility. But much of the cruelty, distance, or hostility you've received from those you cared for did not originate from your actions. It originated from their inner fractures, the places inside them that were never held, never nurtured, never acknowledged. Your love did not wound them. It illuminated the wounds they were already carrying. And illumination is intolerable to those who have survived by keeping their truths buried. Love is not just affection, comfort, or closeness. Real love is a psychological force. It brings to the surface what someone has spent years trying to suppress. When you give love freely, generously, without manipulation, It creates transparency around you, and people who are living behind emotional barricades experience that transparency as threat. They have crafted identities built on toughness, independence, avoidance, intellectualization, or emotional detachment. Your love melts these defenses. It creates warmth in places they forced to remain cold. Suddenly, the armor they rely on begins to crack, and they don't know what to do with the feelings that leak through those cracks. The truth is that many individuals do not know how to receive love because no one ever modeled it for them. They grew up feeling unseen, unprotected, or emotionally abandoned. Their nervous system interprets closeness not as safety, but as danger. So when you offer real intimacy, they subconsciously respond with the behaviors they once used to survive: withdrawal, blame, aggression, emotional shutting down, devaluing, or creating chaos to regain control. The more sincere your love is, the more deeply it touches the very wounds they hope to never revisit. And because they cannot heal those wounds alone, because they do not have the internal tools to process them, they lash out at the person who unintentionally triggered them. Your presence becomes the catalyst, not the cause. When you show someone loyalty, you expose their fear of abandonment. When you show someone compassion, you expose their shame. When you show someone stability, you expose their inner chaos. When you show someone emotional depth, you expose their emotional numbness. They are not attacking you. They are attacking the parts of themselves that surface in your presence. It is easier to hurt you than to confront the void inside them. Easier to blame you than to accept the pain that has lived in there so long before you arrived. This is why some people sabotage affection, why they run from those who care, why they push away the one person who tried to understand them. Your love becomes a mirror that reflects their inadequacy, their insecurities, their unresolved trauma, their unclaimed pain. And instead of stepping into that mirror, instead of facing the broken pieces, they shatter the reflection. You become the target because you made them feel what they believed they had conquered. You awakened emotions they thought they had outgrown. You reminded them that beneath their constructed identity lies a fragile, unhealed human being who doesn't know how to let themselves be seen. It takes emotional maturity to accept love. It takes inner strength to admit vulnerability. It takes psychological courage to sit with your wounds instead of projecting them onto someone else. Many people are not ready for that kind of courage. They would rather master control than master intimacy. They would rather build walls than build connection. They would rather numb themselves than feel the weight of what they've been avoiding. And when someone is committed to avoidance, your love becomes their enemy, not because it harms them, but because it awakens them. So they attack the reminder. They attack the light. They attack the person who unintentionally uncovers the truths they buried, not realizing that your love was never meant to expose them, but to meet them, not realizing that what rose to the surface was not a threat, but an invitation, not realizing that every reaction they unleashed was a message from their own soul asking to be healed. Rejection and cruelty are sometimes unconscious defense mechanisms of an ego terrified of being seen. At first, this idea seems counterintuitive because people often assume that rejection is intentional, calculated, or fueled by clear reasoning. But much of human behavior operates below conscious awareness. The ego, built on fragile stories about who a person believes themselves to be, becomes defensive the moment it senses vulnerability, intimacy, or exposure. When someone begins to see you too clearly, when they sense that you can perceive their wounds, their insecurities, or the emotions they have long avoided, the ego panics. It does not know how to communicate fear directly, so it communicates through rejection. It does not know how to articulate shame, so it expresses it through cruelty. These reactions are not about you. They are attempts to protect the person from being seen too deeply. Many people construct their identity around what they believe others should see, not around what they truly are. They hide their fear behind confidence, their insecurity behind arrogance, their pain behind indifference. They learn to mask their emotional needs because at some point in their life, needing anything felt dangerous. Vulnerability may have been punished, mocked, ignored, or used against them. As a result, when someone comes close enough to notice the cracks beneath the surface, their instinct is to push that person away. Not because the closeness is wrong, but because the ego is convinced that being known equals being hurt. Cruelty, in this context, becomes a smokescreen. It creates distance. It forces separation. It restores control. When a person fears emotional exposure, they may lash out not out of malice, but out of terror. The mind associates being seen with the possibility of rejection, abandonment, or humiliation. So the ego chooses preemptive rejection. I will push you away before you see too much. I will hurt you before you can hurt me. This logic is deeply unconscious, a survival reflex formed long before adulthood. It takes root in childhood experiences where emotional safety was inconsistent or non-existent. A child who learned to hide their truth becomes an adult who cannot tolerate someone witnessing that truth. Rejection then becomes a shield. Cruelty becomes armor. The person may not even realize they are doing it. They simply feel a sudden discomfort when someone gets close, a discomfort they cannot explain. They interpret this discomfort as something being wrong with the relationship or wrong with the other person. In reality, the discomfort is the surfacing of emotions they suppressed long ago. Someone who has never been allowed to express fear will reject the one who triggers that fear. Someone who has always hidden sadness will push away the person who senses it. Someone who has denied their need for connection will sabotage the moment genuine connection begins to form. The most tragic aspect of this dynamic is that the person being rejected often believes they did something wrong. They analyze their behavior, question their words, doubt their worth, and search for a reason that makes sense. But the reason lies entirely within the inner world of the one doing the rejecting. The ego is not reacting to your flaws, it is reacting to its own reflection. When you show kindness, it exposes the parts of them that feel unworthy. When you show understanding, it reveals their self-doubt. When you offer connection, it awakens their deeply hidden fear of dependence. The ego cannot handle this confrontation. It feels threatened, cornered, exposed. And so it reacts in the only ways it knows: create distance, create conflict, create separation. Cruelty often masks fragility. Behind coldness, there is fear. Behind dismissiveness, there is shame. Behind rejection, there is a desperate desire to maintain emotional safety. To the unconscious mind, being seen is equivalent to being vulnerable, and being vulnerable is equivalent to danger. So the ego works tirelessly to prevent exposure, even if it means destroying relationships, pushing away love, or hurting someone who never wished to hurt them. The cruelty is not a reflection of your worth, but a reflection of how deeply the person fears the human truth rising within them. Human beings project their wounds onto the safest person in the room, usually the one who loves them most. This is one of the most painful and confusing psychological realities, because the person who becomes the target is rarely the cause of the suffering being expressed. Instead, they are the one who feels safe enough for the other person's unconscious pain to surface without fear of abandonment or judgment. People often treat their most loving relationships as emotional containers, vessels into which they pour the unresolved fears, grief, anger, and insecurity they never allowed themselves to feel. The one who loves them becomes the mirror, the witness, the release valve. And because most individuals are unaware of this dynamic, the love they offer is met not with gratitude, but with emotional turbulence. Projection happens when someone takes a feeling they cannot process within themselves and assigns it to someone else. Instead of saying, I am afraid, they say, you make me uncomfortable. Instead of admitting, I feel inadequate, you think you're better than me. Instead of recognizing, I am angry about my past, they claim, you're the one who's hurting me. These distortions arise automatically. Almost reflexively, when old wounds are triggered. And the safest person becomes the target because the nervous system senses they will stay. The unconscious mind thinks, you won't leave me, so it's safe to unload here. Safety becomes permission for the shadow to come out. This is why the most loving individuals often find themselves carrying the emotional burdens of those around them. They become the one who listens, absorbs, supports, forgives. They become the emotional landing pad for someone who has never felt truly seen or heard. But the more someone loves, the more they invite the hidden layers of another person to rise. The one who feels safe enough to reveal their pain also feels safe enough to misdirect it. The projection is not logical, it is primal. The wounded psyche seeks a place to release what it cannot integrate. And love, ironically, becomes that place. Many people do not realize that they are repeating patterns rooted in their earliest relationships. A child who was never allowed to express anger may grow into an adult who releases anger on the person who loves them unconditionally. A child who felt invisible may grow into someone who tests the patience of those who give them attention. A child who was abandoned may try to provoke the one person they believe will stay no matter what. These behaviors are not conscious choices. They are unconscious reenactments. They are attempts to resolve old wounds through present relationships, even if those attempts create more pain. When someone loves you deeply, you awaken emotional territories within them that they did not even know existed. Your presence becomes an invitation to feel, and feeling can be terrifying. So instead of exploring those emotions, they push them outward. They accuse you of intentions you never held. They misinterpret your words, your actions, your silence. They react not to you, but to a ghost from their past. You become the symbol of everything that hurt them long before you arrived. The person who loves them most becomes the safest vessel for the wounds they never healed. This dynamic creates confusion because love becomes entangled with suffering. You begin to wonder why kindness evokes hostility, why support triggers defensiveness, why closeness results in conflict. But what you are witnessing is not a reaction to your behavior. It is the surfacing of buried emotions that finally found a place to land. The safest person in the room is the one who receives what everyone else rejected. And love, especially deep love, acts as a catalyst that brings unresolved pain to the surface. Understanding this does not remove the hurt, but it provides clarity. When someone projects their wounds onto you, it does not mean you caused the wound. It means you were the first person who felt safe enough to receive it. Their pain recognizes your love as a home, even when their mind does not understand why. They express what they cannot express anywhere else, not because you deserve the projection, but because you represent emotional safety. Love becomes the container for the very wounds that make love difficult for them to fully receive or offer. When they treat you badly despite your kindness, it reveals their inner war, not your inner worth. People often assume that the way others behave toward them is a direct reflection of their own value, but human behavior is rarely that simple. Every interaction is filtered through the emotional history, defenses, traumas, insecurities, and unresolved pain of the person standing in front of you. You may offer warmth, patience, and sincerity, yet be met with coldness, anger, or cruelty. This contradiction is not evidence of your inadequacy, but a sign of the psychological conflict raging within them, a conflict they may not even recognize is occurring. Kindness, especially genuine and consistent kindness, acts like a spotlight. It brings clarity, it reveals contrast, it shows people who they are in your presence. When you treat someone with compassion, it exposes the parts of them that feel undeserving of compassion. When you offer stability, it makes them confront the instability they carry inside. When you show them acceptance, it highlights their fear of being truly known. Your kindness becomes a mirror reflecting the truth they have spent years or even decades avoiding. And for someone who has learned to survive by disconnecting from themselves, such a mirror feels threatening. The inner war they are fighting often begins long before you enter their life. It is shaped by unhealed wounds, by memories they buried, by beliefs they formed about their worth, and by experiences where vulnerability led to pain rather than safety. If someone has been taught that love is conditional, your unconditional kindness confuses them. If they learn that trust leads to betrayal, your reliability alarms them. If they were raised to believe they are unworthy, your respect feels foreign, almost suspicious. Their nervous system reacts before their mind understands, creating behaviors that seem irrational from the outside, but feel like protection from the inside. This is why people may sabotage, criticize, dismiss, or even push away the one person who means them no harm. Their cruelty is not intentional malice, but a shield, an instinctual defense formed to guard the fragile parts of themselves they are terrified to expose. When they lash out, what they are really fighting is the emotional material your presence awakens. You become a catalyst for their internal conflict. Every act of kindness touches a place inside them that has been neglected, and that neglected place cries out in confusion, fear, or anger. They fight the feeling, not the person. Yet the person standing closest becomes the target. Your inner worth does not diminish simply because someone is unable to receive your goodness. Their inability to embrace your presence does not mean your presence was the problem. It means they lack the internal capacity to hold what you offer. People in the midst of an inner war do not see reality clearly. They see through the lens of self-protection. They interpret love as danger, attention as pressure, boundaries as rejection. Their reactions are filtered through past experiences, not through your genuine intentions. When they treat you badly, it often reveals their struggle between who they are and who they wish they were. Your kindness reminds them of what they have lost. Your understanding exposes the disconnect between their heart and their defenses. Your compassion highlights the emotional distance they maintain within themselves. They are fighting to protect old wounds, fighting to keep their identity intact, fighting to avoid vulnerability that feels unbearable. And because they cannot fight the pain directly, they fight the person who brings that pain to the surface. Many people are unaware that they are living in a constant state of inner conflict. They believe they are reacting to you when they are actually reacting to echoes from their past. They believe you caused their discomfort when your presence simply revealed it. They believe you asked too much when all you offered was sincerity. Their behavior reflects the war within, a war between longing and fear, between connection and protection, between their true self and the defensive self they created to survive. Understanding this does not excuse mistreatment, but it frees you from carrying emotional weight that never belonged to you. It brings clarity to the confusion, meaning to the chaos, and perspective to the pain. And most importantly, it reminds you that your worth is not measured by how others handle their inner battles. Their cruelty is a symptom of their conflict, not a verdict on your value.